Hey, welcome back to the channel. I'm Jamil. This is a boy named Jamil. Let's get right into it. So, you guys, I shot with the Canon EOS R3 all day today, and I have some thoughts. I want to let you guys know though that this is just a like first impressions video. And in this first impressions video, I want to approach it as someone who is talking to someone who's thinking about what is the very best camera that they can get if they could only buy one camera. If you could only buy one camera, these are my first impressions on the EOS R3 as that one camera that you can have. So, and the way that I think that I approach this, or the thoughts that I'm having, is that everything good about this camera also has like a flip side, the other side of a coin to it. And so you guys will kind of get into it. You guys will kind of understand as I get into it what I mean by that. So the first thing, and the first initial thing that I think comes to mind is just how amazing this camera feels in the hand. I am not someone who regularly shoots with a vertical grip. I have vertical grips for my my A7R4. I have a vertical grip for it, but I don't end up shooting with it a lot, just because although it does help, it doesn't feel natural to the camera. Like, it doesn't feel like it's a natural part of the camera. But this built-in vertical grip on this R3 does in fact feel like it is a part of this camera, like it should be there. And so I do like that. The grip is nice and chunky. It feels like an actual grip, not just an afterthought. A lot of times I do feel like the grips on the Sony bodies were an afterthought after they decided that they wanted to get their mirrorless cameras as small as possible. I'm not knocking the grip. I do still like the way that these cameras feel in my hand. But if I am comparing it to this camera feels amazing in the hand. And we've talked about this before. I have big hands. I'm a basketball player. And this camera does just feel amazing in the hand. A lot of the buttons, you do feel like the buttons on this camera allows you to kind of maneuver about this camera with both hands. And just the size of this camera almost makes you feel like you have to, especially when you have a lens attached to it. And we'll talk more about that in a second. But just as you move about the camera, the buttons are in such a way that it allows for like two-hand maneuverability. So the other side of that coin, with the size of this camera, is just that this is a huge camera. And I say this, remember, from the viewpoint of someone who's thinking, would I want this to be my only camera? If I could only have one camera, would I want this to be my camera? I think that question is answered differently by a number of people. If I'm someone who shoots sports or car racing, or any kind of fast-paced events, then maybe, and that was the only thing I shot, right? I didn't shoot portraits. I didn't shoot street photography. I didn't shoot, landscapes. If those were the only things that I shot, then I could see how that person would say like, oh, this would be great for my one camera. But here's the thing that I kept thinking about as I went about shooting with this camera today. And just to kind of give you guys an idea of where I went, I took my family over to the pumpkin patch. And so I was just shooting about the pumpkin patch, shooting some photos of my kids or whatever. And it just so happened that the lens that I had on it was the 28-70 f2. Great lens, f2 throughout, amazing feat of technology. But here's the issue. Here's the issue that I ran into. And this is the other side of that coin that I was talking about when we're talking about the size of this camera. I am someone who shoots portraits of other people, and a lot of times those portraits are in public. We are out amongst people. We are out shooting, portraits, amongst other people. And one of the things that I'm almost always aware of, especially because of the size of person that I am also, is how my presence feels to other people. And so one of the things that I love about the cameras that I shoot with is that they are unintrusive. They're unintrusive cameras. Even when I'm shooting street, when I'm shooting portraits, my cameras are unintrusive. So just to give you an idea, this is my Sony a7R IV with my 35mm G Master on it. This is the total package. This is what it is. So whether I'm shooting, street photos, when a lot of times I am in front of people and I am snapping photos of them, or even if I'm just shooting portraits of someone, or I'm shooting landscapes, right? Or I'm shooting cityscapes. When I bring this camera up to my face, it's not so big of a kit that it's intrusive to other people, that it would allow for people to kind of stop in their tracks and, kind of ask the question of what is he doing? Or is he taking this photo of me? Or any of that. This payload disallows for that, right? When you bring this camera up and you put it to your eye, this is a lot of camera. And there's no way that this is not intrusive to passerbyers. There's no way that I could walk about and use this camera as a street photography camera. This is just not the camera for that instance. And so on one side of the coin, this camera does feel amazing in the hand. It does allow for two-hand maneuverability. But for my use case, street photography, portraits, landscapes, cityscapes, all of the kind of things that I like to shoot. If I were shooting video, you know what I mean? I don't know that this camera allows me to be unintrusive to other people. And secondly, I don't know that I would want to carry this camera around for the hours and hours that it would be shooting, street photos or shooting weddings. This is a lot of camera. I know there's a shooter, I think her name is Vanessa Joy. I think she shoots weddings with this R3. And I just worry that, I don't worry for her, I just wonder, I guess, how she tugs this thing around for the hours and hours of, wedding photography that she does. So that's the first kind of thing that was immediate when shooting with this camera. The second thing is that, man, in electronic shutter, which this camera came any electronic shutter setting, you can fire off 30 frames per second, boom, in a heartbeat. It's so fast. It's so fast. It's one of the things that if you guys watched my A7R5 video, it's one of the things that I said I hope the A7R5 comes with. This is a CMOS back illuminated stacked sensor. So this sensor is just getting readouts incredibly fast readouts. And so you don't have to worry about things like, rolling shutter, or if you're a sports photographer, you don't have to worry about balls warping or anything like that. It's incredibly fast. And if I were that type of shooter, this would be a bonus. And I'm not saying that it's not a bonus. What I'm saying, remember, I'm coming at this from the mindset of someone who can only have one camera. If you can only have one camera and you're thinking about the R3, those 30 frames per second, amazing as a sports photographer. But here's the thing. If you're shooting in electronic shutter and you don't need 30 frames per second, all right? Let's say you wanted to lower that from 30 frames per second. Let's say you're someone who just doesn't need it. 20 frames per second, so to speak. You can't have that. It only gives you the choice of 30, then 15, right? And then something lower than that. And so between 30 and 15, you might as well go back to the mechanical shutter, and then you might as well give the camera more megapixels. And so that's the other side to that speed, that readout, is that it's only doing those 30 frames per second at 24, 28 megapixels or something like that. I know that there's a lot of people, and I know sports photographers will say that they don't need anything more than 24 megapixels. There's a lot of people who will say that 24 megapixels is all you need. There's a lot of people who will say 12 megapixels is all you need. There's people who will say that you need to get the shot right in camera so that you don't have to worry about those things. I am not one of those people. The thing that I love about my A7R4 is the ability to crop and recompose photos in the case that I need to. Do I try to get it right in camera 100%? Absolutely I do. I'm always going to try to do that. But that's not to say that sometimes when you're looking at a photo and you're thinking like, oh, this would be better if this thing wasn't in it. Or you take a photo and someone walks, just into frame, you know what I mean? It's great to be able to just crop those people out and not worry about if you have enough megapixels. I lost the light. To not worry about whether or not you have enough megapixels to allow you to do that. 24 megapixels on this camera, when realistically, if you don't need 30 frames per second, if the next frame rate down is 15 and you have this stacked sensor, I think that you possibly could have gotten the megapixels up to, 33 megapixels like the A7R4. Again, I want to reiterate that I'm coming at this from the mindset of a person who can only have one camera, right? You don't have the leeway to buy multiple cameras to fit, certain niches of your photography, right? Like me, my walk around camera every day is my A7C. The camera that when I know that I'm going to be doing really serious photos and really serious videos, and I'm going to be running and gunning and switching between the two, right? I know to bring my A7 IV. If I am going out and I'm going to be taking street photos or landscapes or cityscapes, and I want to be able to have the most megapixels that I possibly can, in the case that I need to crop, then I have my A7R4. If this was my one only camera, yeah, I'm excited about those 30 frames per second. I'm excited about that readout, but I am left wanting with 24 megapixels. If I had a choice, I would rather just have the 20 frames per second that you have on the R6 and the ability to shoot at 33 or 35 megapixels. I can't remember what the R6 is. I would rather have those megapixels for my use case than the fast, frames per second ability to shoot at 30, especially when, if I wanted to go down, it's only 15 frames per second. And then, if you do switch the camera over to mechanical shutter, it drops to 12 frames per second. I think I'm right about that. I'm sure you guys will let me know down in the comments, but I think it drops down to either 12 or 15 frames per second. I know that in mechanical shutter, you cannot shoot 30 frames per second. And so if you can't do that, you have the stacked sensor. Give me the megapixels. All right, and so then my last thoughts about just this package, just this payload. And I know that this is a video about the R3, but you need to put a lens on it, right? You need a lens to put on it because no camera works without a lens. And when we're talking about a walk around lens, when we're talking about a walk around zoom lens that you can just do the most with, I don't think that there's a better lens on the market from any of the major camera brands than this 28-70 f2. Listen, this is an f2 constant, and there's nothing else like it on the market. There is a Tamron lens for Sony E-mount that starts at 35. I personally am not someone who shoots a lot of wide angle portraits. I am not someone who shoots a lot of wide angle most things, right? My widest is my 20 millimeter, and even when I'm shooting landscapes, I don't find myself pulling out the 20 millimeter a lot, just because I do find myself adding foreground elements to the landscapes. I'm actually going to put a video by a photographer named John Pappas, sorry if I butcher your name, where he talks about why he ends up shooting prime lenses at like 35 or even 85 for his landscape photography. And I thought that it was really interesting, and I incorporated a lot of what he said in that video into my own photography. Even when I'm shooting landscapes, I don't find myself shooting at 24 or 20 or 16 or anything like that. I do find myself staying around the 35 millimeter mark. So when we're talking about this lens that begins at 28 and goes all the way out to 70, this lens is just, it's amazing. It's a constant 2.0 throughout. Oh, and we were talking about the Tamron lens from 35 to 150. If I were gonna buy, which is also a constant 2.0 throughout. It says 2.0 to 2.8, and so I should fix that. It's a constant 2.8 from 38 to 150. Let's call it that. So there's no other lens like this one on the market. It's an incredible feat of engineering when we're thinking about how they got this 28-70 as a constant 2. You're able to blur out that background. For portraits, it's an amazing portrait lens. 2.8 might as well be 1.8 if you're asking me. It's a very slight difference in depth of field, and so this lens, man, if you ask me if you ask me what the best walk around lens is, and I think if you ask a lot of people, it's this 28-70 2.0. But remember, there's always that other side of the coin. And the other side of that coin is that this is a heavy, heavy, heavy lens. This is my 135 G Master. And you guys can just see the difference between the sizes of this lens, right? And I don't mean to compare, this to this. These are different use cases, but this is my longest, this is my biggest, heaviest lens at the moment. And so I just want to give you the kind of idea. And again, I'm talking from the vantage point of someone who can only buy, this camera. And if for your money you want to buy the best lens to go with this camera, this is the payload that you are working with. And I wish I had like a scale to measure just how heavy this is, but I'll just look it up and I'll put the total weight right here of this payload. It's a chunky boy. It's a chunky boy of a lens. And when attached to this camera, it just becomes outrageously big. And for all of the reasons that I was talking about before, about wanting to stay unintrusive to other people, about not wanting to lug the weight around for hours and hours of time, for not wanting this much weight in a camera, you can't get around just how heavy this payload is together. All right, so let's put a conclusion on this video. Remember, this is just a first impressions video. This wasn't to say that this was a bad camera, or this wasn't a video to say that, you know, our Canon or Sony camera is better. This is not what that video was about. This was just a video of first impressions of this camera, coming from the mindset of a person who could only have one camera and was looking for the best camera that would allow them to do all of the different things that photography allows. And I just don't know if this is that camera for all of the reasons. And I think the number one reason is just that this payload is huge. There's no way around it. And I don't know right off of the top of my head just how big the regular 24-70 RF lens is. I don't know how big the RF 70 to 100 is. It's not 70 to 100, 70 to 200. I don't know how big that lens is. I know that it's a small lens compared to the EF lens, but still, that lens on this camera, I'm still imagining would be a big payload. I don't know, you know, how big the 85-1.2 is or the 50-1.2 is. I know that the 50-1.2 for the RF is a larger lens than the 50-1.2 for the Sony. For all of the reasons that I talked about this just being a huge camera, for it not giving the, you know, for it not having more than 24 megapixels, for just the overall payload of this camera being really heavy. And again, I'm looking at it from my use cases. Someone who does a lot of street photography, walking around for hours carrying this camera. Someone who does, you know, landscape photography. Someone who does, you know, portraits and tries to stay as unintrusive as I possibly can for the most amount of time. I don't know that this is the one camera setup for someone to have, especially when there are R6s out there that, you know, allows you to do those things. The R5 is an amazing camera to be able to do those. And so, and all of that, I didn't even get into the video. I don't ever see myself, you know, running and gunning with this setup. And so that's a whole nother video. Anyway, if you guys got this far, throw me some deuces down in the comments. Let me know what you think about these thoughts. Again, coming from the mindset of someone who can only have one camera. Someone who can only have one camera to fit all of their photography needs. Let's talk about it down in the comments. Thank you guys for watching this video. Again, I'm Jamil. This is a boy named Jamil. And I'll catch you guys in the next video. Peace.